off to the surface-dwelling humans as a psychic and a magician, and for these acts, Amo was exiled to live on the surface, 20 miles outside of the present-day city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia. As long as the people in the inner earth spent most of their life in the inner earth, then they will not die. However, to be exiled to the surface world means a person from inner earth will eventually die like the mortals on the surface. In the caverns adjacent to the Shayuk, resides another group of nobles called the Sinin. The Sinin are also highly intelligent, but also have a fighting spirit. The Sinin are between 5 feet to 7 feet tall and have a variety of complexions from yellow to brown, and they are hairless and are most noted for their cone-shaped heads. The Sinin commonly interact and have mixed with surface world humans including the ancient Egyptians, the Olmecs in present-day Central America, the Mangitog people in the African Congo, and the Paracas people in Peru. The chief of the Sinin is named King Lamsa, and his daughter is named Princess Lucina, and his son is named Prince Atif. One of the wretched group of beings which resides inside the earth is called the Samin. The Samin are grotesquely obese, pale, with long elephant-like noses, and are very negative and aggressive. The Samin were actually the manifested evil grafted out of the Sinin on their home world prior to these beings arriving on Earth. Since the Samin were grafted out of the Sinin, it is the responsibility of the Sinin to police and keep in check the evil activities of the Samin. It is said that an American named Richard Sharpshaver encountered the Sinin and called them the Turos, meaning interrogative robot, and he also encountered the Samin and called them Duros, meaning detrimental robot. One day, the wretched Samin raided and invaded the village of the Shayuk, stealing food and terrorizing the Shayuk family. When King Fukur found out about this invasion by the Samin, he sent a telepathic message to King Lamsa stating that the Sinin has neglected their responsibility to keep the Samin in check, because the Samin were currently raiding and invading the village of the Shayuk. Upon receiving the telepathic message from King Fukur, King Lamsa went with his brethren to the caverns of the Shayuk to stop the invasion by the Samin and to drive the Samin back to whence they came. After driving the Samin away from the lands of the Shayuk, King Lamsa apologized to King Fukur, but tension remained between the Shayuk and the Sinin for some time after the incident. In order to make peace between the Shayuk and the Sinin, King Lamsa offered his daughter Princess Lucina to be a wife of King Fukur. King Fukur accepted the peace offering from King Lamsa, and in turn offered his daughter Princess Radiya to be the wife of King Lamsa's son Prince Atif, as was the custom, and there was peace in the land for some time between the two tribes of the Shayuk and the Sinin. However, King Lamsa's daughter Princess Lucina was angered and outraged because she did not want her father to give her away to be the wife of the Shayuk King Fukur. Princess Lucina felt like an outcast and out of place living amongst the Shayuk people, and she did not like living by the strict laws of the Shayuk people. Princess Lucina always wanted to marry a man from her own people the Sinin, and she did not want to be married to a Shayuk man. One day Princess Lucina, now the unhappy wife of King Fukur, met Yacob, the jealous brother of King Fukur, and they conspired together based on their hatred for King Fukur to have an illicit sexual affair together behind the back of King Fukur. Princess Lucina and Yacob would travel to the surface world to the home of Emo, the exiled brother of King Fukur and Yacob, and it is here where they would have their illicit affair. This affair between Princess Lucina and Yacob went on for months with them sneaking back and forth from the inner earth to the surface world, and eventually Princess Lucina became pregnant. In her pregnant state, Princess Lucina would not return to the land of the inner earth, but would remain at the home of Emo, and Yacob would stay with her. It was here in the home of Emo, 20 miles outside of the present-day city of Mecca, Saudi Arabia, where the child Yacob was born to Yacob and Princess Lucina. The child Yacob, being part Shayuk and part Sinin, had an enormous head the size of 2 men, and he also had 2 brains. Knowing that they could not return to the inner earth because their affair had now produced a child, Yacob and Princess Lucina decided to live and raise the baby Yacob for 5 years in the home of Emo, 20 miles outside of the present-day city of Mecca, Saudi Arabia. Yacob's father Yacob would work as a scientist and a priest amongst the humans on the surface, calling himself by the title Mornuakan, the last high priest. Back in inner earth, Yacob and Princess Lucina had been missing for years, and eventually it was found out by King Fukur about the affair between his wife Princess Lucina and his brother Yacob. King Fukur ordered his soldiers to go to the home of his brother Emo and arrest Yacob for his crime, and according to the laws of the Shayuk, Yacob was put to death. Princess Lucina's life was spared because she now had a child to take care of, but her punishment was to remain exiled to the surface world living in the home of Emo, and to never return to inner earth. Depressed about her inability to return home, overwhelmed by her new responsibility to raise a child, and saddened by the death of her lover Yacob, Princess Lucina kills herself by committing suicide. The 5-year-old child Yacob, now an orphan, is raised by his uncle Amo, and the child Yacob is emotionally disturbed and rebellious because of the death of his parents. The child Yacob grows to hate his people the Shayug, and he also grows to hate all dark-complexioned people because he blames them for the death of his parents. The child Yacob desires to have his revenge when he grows up. Yacob starts school at the age of 4, and is teased and mocked about the size of his head by the surface-dwelling human children. This mockery and teasing about the size of his head that Yacob experienced as a child created low self-esteem, and further infuriated the already deranged Yacob, fueling his desire for revenge. Yacob's uncle Amo would tell Yacob stories about the beings in the inner earth and how the Samin were the manifestation of the evil grafted out of Yacob's mother's family, the Sinin. One day, when Yacob was 6 years old, he was playing with 2 steel magnets in the home of his uncle Amo, and Yacob noticed the magnetic power of attraction and repulsion that unlike attracts, and like repels. By observing this, Yacob was inspired with a determined idea to create a tribe unlike any of the people on the surface of the planet, and this unlike tribe would be weak and wicked, and attract the other tribes on the surface of the planet, and rule over them with the knowledge of tricks and lies for 6,000 years. Upon coming to this realization, Yacob looked up at his uncle Amo and said, "Uncle, when I get to be an old man, I am going to make a people who shall rule you." Uncle Amo said, "What will you make?" "Someone to make mischief and cause bloodshed in the land." Yacob responded to his uncle Amo by saying, "Nevertheless, uncle, I know that which you do not know," and it was at that moment, the boy Yacob first came into the knowledge of just who he was, born to make trouble, break peace, kill and destroy, and be the enemy to the Ebenoid people of Earth. Yacob knew in order to accomplish his plan he would have to study science, biology, and genetics. Yacob was a child prodigy in school, being exceptionally smarter than the surface-dwelling humans he was going to school with, and by the age of 18, Yacob had finished all of the colleges and universities of his nation. While in college, Yacob was mocked and teased being called the big head scientist. After graduating from the colleges and universities of his nation, Yacob began to preach a new doctrine to the people in the city. Yacob called his new doctrine Tricknology, and his holy book was called the Book of Tricknology of 120 Degrees. Yacob taught that if people followed his doctrine, then they would be able to rule the world for 6,000 years, and make slaves out of everyone else on the earth. Yacob made such impressions on the people that many people began following him. The children who once mocked and teased Yacob were now requesting to be part of what he was teaching. The girls who once laughed at Yacob were now women who desired him. As Yacob's teachings spread, he made more and more converts to his new doctrine, and the power of Yacob's doctrine began to intimidate the king of the surface-dwelling humans, who ordered to have Yacob and all of his followers thrown in prison. The police arrested all of Yacob's followers and put them in prison, and filled up all of the prison cells with Yacob's followers. However, there was not enough space to put all of Yacob's followers in jail, therefore there were still some people free who were spreading Yacob's teachings. The police notified the king that they did not have enough space for all of Yacob's followers, and at that point the king decided to go to Yacob's prison cell and negotiate a deal. The king went to visit Yacob in his prison cell, and the king said, "So you are Mr. Yacob?" Yacob said, "Yes, I am." The king said, "Yacob, I have come to see if we could work out some agreement that would bring about an end to this trouble. What would you suggest?" Yacob said to the king, "If you give me and my followers everything to start a civilization, and furnish us with money and other necessities of life for 20 years, I will take my followers and we will leave." The king was pleased with the deal offered by Yacob, and agreed to take care of them for 20 years, until Yacob's followers were able to go for themselves. After 20 years, the government began to make preparation for the exiling of Yacob and his followers. The king ordered everyone rounded up who was a believer in Yacob's doctrine, and they took them to the seaport and loaded them on ships. When Yacob and his followers departed, there were a total of 59,999 followers plus Yacob, making 60,000 total people on 100 ships. Yacob and his fleet of ships departed from an area 20 miles outside of the present-day city of Mecca, Saudi Arabia, and set sail on the Red Sea, and sailed all the way around the continent of Africa to go to their destination, which was the area which is currently called the island of Patmos, or Palam, in the Aegean Sea. While on the ships sailing around Africa to get to the area which is currently called the island of Patmos, Yacob began the second part of his plan, which was a eugenics human graftation experiment. Even though all of the people on the surface of the earth were of one tribe, the Ebenoid tribe, there was still some variation within the Ebenoid tribe, and Yacob began to highlight these differences, and Yacob taught these people that they were special, because Yacob planned to use them to graft his new tribe. Yacob developed his theory by studying his own genetics under the microscope and noticing that there were two different genes in him, one gene that was dark from his father Yishak's family the Shayuk, and the other that was not dark from his mother Princess Lucina's family the Sinin. Yacob began to have children with the women on this ship, and the babies which were born that were a lighter complexion he would spare their life, but the babies which were born which were of a darker complexion, Yacob would have thrown overboard into the ocean. Yacob felt if he could successfully separate the darker gene from the lighter gene, then he could graft the Ebenoid tribe into its last stage, which would be albinoid. Yacob planned to create a tribe of albinoids, which he discovered was weaker than the Ebenoid gene, which would be unalike, to rule the Ebenoid nation for 6,000 years. When Yacob's followers found out about his new wicked plan, and learned that he was killing and throwing babies overboard into the ocean, 95% of his followers lost their loyalty to Yacob, and abandoned his mission and jumped ship. As Yacob's fleet of ships sailed around Africa, people who lost loyalty to his mission would jump ship into the areas which are now Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, Djibouti, Somalia, Mozambique, Namibia, Senegal, Morocco, and Tunisia. 10% of the original 60,000 of Yacob's followers betrayed Yacob and jumped ship. 85% of the original 60,000 of Yacob's followers jumped ship because they were confused why he would do such a horrible thing, leaving only 5% of the original 60,000 of Yacob's followers who actually made it to their destination of the island of Patmos in the Aegean Sea. As king on his island, Yacob set up birth control and Planned Parenthood laws which would contribute to his plan of negative eugenics and genocide to breed his albinoid tribe. Yacob made it a law that only the lighter complexion people could have children. People with darker complexions were put to death, and when children were born, nurses were ordered to have the darker babies killed by pricking the brains with a sharp needle as soon as the child's head was out of the mother, but the lighter babies were allowed to live. Yacob's aim was to kill and destroy the Ebenoid nation. Yacob would have the dead bodies of the darker babies fed to wild beasts, and if they could not find a wild beast to feed the bodies to, they would take the dead bodies of the babies to a cremator to be burned. This is the level of intense hatred Yacob had in his heart. This process went on for years on Yacob's island as Yacob trained his sons and grandsons to carry on his work after he died. Yacob died at the age of 150 years old from a brain tumor. As the father of technology, Yacob taught his people a doctrine which would enable them to rule the world for 6,000 years. Yacob also taught his people that God is a spirit and a spook and not a man, and Yacob was the founder of the doctrine that unalike attraction